I just wanted to bounce a couple of sort of final layout options off of you here just to see what you think of them. Just trying to give you some extra choices here. I was thinking of heights related to our layout because, yeah, it's cool that it, scales, right, the way it's supposed to. That's great. But what about the height of everything? Well, the height of the header and the height of the footer are being determined by the content that we have in there, as well as the padding that we've thrown in there as well, those M values, right? And then the height of the main content area is coming off of the actual text that you and I have dropped in there, sort of that dummy text that will get replaced with our actual real text as soon as we roll out our website, right? So I thought I would throw a couple of things off of you here. What you could do inside your code with your header and your footer here is you could force a height if you wanted to. And this is very similar to what you had seen in the previous chapter when we were messing around with this. So again, these could be temporary heights, or these could be heights that you decide to leave in. So all I'm doing here with the header is I've just thrown on height 100 pixels, and I'll do something similar for the footer here. I'll throw in a height of just 50 pixels, something like this. Save that fella up, refresh. We now have something like this, right? Now we have kind of this top-heavy looking site, though. The content looks kind of squished in here now all of a sudden. But, well, actually, you know what? Let me show you something really cool here, just looking at that. Kind of spurred something here. There's our content ID, right? The guy that's controlling the content div. What we could do with him is, well, a few things. We could do something like this, which again is very similar to what you saw earlier, right? So something like that. There's our layout, which still scales properly the way we want it to, right? Hang on, I'm just going to hide everything there so you can see this better. There we go. So everything scales properly, right? All I've done is I just forced a height on this content. That's all I've done, right? But the only problem with this, I'm not sure if this is going to work properly for me or not. I'm completely just doing this off the top of my head, so I just want to try something here. I just enclosed my dummy text inside a paragraph. And if I paste this out a bunch of times, like this, and then refresh, okay, that's what I was expecting. I just wanted to make sure there. Because I forced the height, what happens is the div, this content div, is not going to expand vertically. And what happens is the content now spills outside of that div, and it spills over top of my footer. It looks terrible. What I would much prefer is if the footer, again, much like we saw in the previous chapter, I want the footer to automatically move up and down inside my layout, right? So I want the footer just to dynamically move on the page depending on the amount of content that I have here, right? So what I cannot do in that situation is I cannot force a height. If I specify a height, then everything gets blown to heck, right? So I'm going to remove my height now and refresh, and now the footer moves down to the bottom, which is awesome, right? However, does that make sense? I hope that's cool. So don't force a height. And now we have a dynamic footer. So in other words, if I come back into my code and I toast a couple of paragraphs, or a few paragraphs here anyway, something like this, and refresh, now the footer just moves up vertically up the page, right? Which is great. It's awesome. But there's a problem with this. I mean, it works at first glance, it works. And it works in sort of the appropriate direction, right? It's going to move up and down for us based on the amount of content that we have in there. Awesome, right? But have you seen this on pages or on websites where they don't have enough content, where maybe they just have a line of text? This page is still under construction, right? Refresh. So now you have the footer now kind of jammed up towards the top. I mean, maybe in the real world it wouldn't be completely jammed up to the top because we'd have different menu items and things. But the footer, on one page is way too close to the top, like way up towards the top. And on other pages, it's like a mile down, down towards the bottom, right? So what I want to show you, I'm just going to undo what I've done here. Actually, I think I still have that pasted, or copied, I should say. Okay, so I'm going to, actually, no, I'm just going to paste it once. Sorry, I'm talking to myself here. Okay, so what I want to do here is, instead of having the footer being completely dynamic, and again, sort of what I was saying a moment ago is it works sort of in one direction, and it's great, but it's a double-edged sword, because if you don't have enough content, then your layout completely collapses vertically and it looks terrible, right? So what we can do, instead of specifying a height for the content ID, is we can specify a minimum height. So in other words, the height on this container has to be at least X number of pixels, right? So check this out. I'm going to type in MIN hyphen height, full colon space, and then throw in a value, some kind of a minimum height. I'm going to use 400 pixels. Why? I don't know, 400 pixels. And then refresh. Okay. So now, even though the content is not, we don't have very much content here, the minimum height on this main content div is always going to be at least 400, even if there's no content inside that div at all, right? Or if I have a lot of content inside that div, and the rock means a lot of content inside that div, then the footer is going to behave like it should. It's just going to head down towards the bottom of the page. It's going to expand vertically, right? That's how that works. So, very, very cool property that I find myself using a lot is that minimum height, min height. I have a feeling, though, and you might want to check this out on your own, I have a feeling that this property does not work in Internet Explorer. Surprise, surprise. So you might want to check that out on your own. But anyway, I wanted to show you that. I wanted to show you a couple of other cool things there, setting the heights for the headers and the footers and so on. But there it is, your combo layouts, static and fixed layouts using CSS.